What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield holding it down for us in Boston. We are brought to you by Wrangler, made for the ride of life. Save 15% on your first Wrangler.com order with promo code GOJO15. We got a great show for you guys. Very excited here. As always, download, subscribe, rate, review, 5-star rating, DraftKings YouTube, DraftKingsNetwork.com, Samsung TV Plus, all from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. It's a lot of things.
It's a lot of things.
It's a lot of places. And thankfully, we have all of those places because we have Vikings quarterback Kirk Cousins coming to join us today as they are trying to climb out of the 0-2 hole to start the season. We will also talk to senior college football writer over at The Athletic, Nicole Auerbach, to touch on some of what's gone on at Michigan State as they have now informed Mel Tucker of their intent to terminate him as their head football coach. But Dad, Jesse, we got to start to have the talk, and everyone listening should have the talk with their children about what they saw on Monday Night Football last night. Because, dear God, Dad, even as a former defensive football player, the smut that we saw on our television screens, not once but twice. I talked yesterday about being excited for the Monday Night Football doubleheader, and I feel like I cursed us because what we got last night was an absolute heaping helping of offensive slop.
We were watching the game on the couch, and I'm like, is this good defense or is this bad offense? And like anything else, it's probably a combination because of these four teams, you have three that are really good defensive teams, right? Cleveland, absolutely. Pittsburgh, and New Orleans are really, really good defensive teams. And New Orleans was dealing with a rookie quarterback who was going through the learning process. But the thing I was looking for was really in the Cleveland-Pittsburgh game, the rebounding of Pittsburgh after just getting taken to the woodshed against San Francisco. That was kind of surprising to a lot of people. And Cleveland in that incredible defensive dominant first week they had, do they carry on? And does the offense start to come alive and Deshaun Watson start to become what Cleveland got him for when he was one of the top 5 quarterbacks when he was with Houston? Unfortunately, not a lot of great offenses, as you mentioned, for anybody last night. Bryce Young did the rookie thing, wasn't great. Derek Carr, I mean, that offense isn't unloading anything in New Orleans. And the two offenses for Cleveland and Pittsburgh, not very pretty at all. And then the decimating injury to Nick Chubb last night, which to me headlines everything. I mean, Cleveland's offense runs through Nick Chubb, who has been nothing but just a tank running the ball. And I think he did the all AC team.
The all CL.
I'm sorry, the all CL, the all AC, the all CL team. It was one of those where right away they said, don't show the replays. And second quarter early, he got his knee blown out. Minka Fitzpatrick hit him low when his foot was planted, and basically his knee just exploded.
And mercifully, the broadcast crew realized it early enough and didn't show the replay on that. But as you mentioned, Dad, this game felt like a crossroads for the Browns in a lot of ways. Because I think your first point I actually disagreed with in the Browns offense runs through Nick Chubb. They had been trying to run it through Deshaun Watson through the early portion of the season. And I thought during this game, it was becoming abundantly clear as they are trying to maximize their $230 million investment. It has so far not worked. Gone back to last year and through the first 2 games of this year. This is just not the Deshaun Watson these guys thought they were paying for when they spent that money. And what had become apparent during this game was the only success they were having was when they decided we are going to treat this offense like Nick Chubb is the best player on it. And right as that thought was coming into my brain, that second quarter injury happened. And now it appears by everything we've heard from the Browns and by everything that we all saw, that is going to be the end of Nick Chubb's season. And that is unfortunate on a lot of levels. Macro, when we talk about the running back situation, micro, when we talk about Nick Chubb as a person and that's effect on this team, because Dad, that is one of the best, if not the best running backs in the NFL and as important to any team's success as anyone we're going to see. And Jerome Ford went out there and played really well for the rest of the game. Broke a big, long touchdown run. And they're still, I think, going to have to, if the Browns want to have success this season with a roster that looks largely like a Super Bowl roster around Deshaun Watson and around the quarterback, although you could argue up front last night it was anything but as well. But if they're going to have any sort of success, they're going to have a long, hard discussion philosophically about what this team wants to be. And if they're willing to have it look more like what Kevin Stefanski's offenses have usually looked like, more under center, more of the run stuff, more square peg into round hole for some of the quarterbacks, or if they're going to continue to try and make Deshaun Watson the centerpiece of this, where as of right now, in the sample size we have since he's come back from suspension, he does not look capable of shouldering that load.
And I agree with you in saying that's exactly what they should be trying to do, running through Deshaun Watson. We all kept saying, is this when he gets back to being that quarterback he was? And I think that's the right thing to do because he can move as well. And I think it would just really kind of heighten the worth of Nick Chubb, who was already, one of the best in the league, and how much that would help if this offense was running through Deshaun Watson with him passing and with him running the ball. Oh, by the way, ran a couple of times and he grabbed the face mask of the defender.
Yeah, I would say, a small victory for defensive players everywhere. Seeing offensive face masking, I think called twice this weekend.
Yeah.
Once on a quarterback, which seemed, separate from that class of player.
I'm glad they're finally calling that because it definitely happens. But I do think that's the right way to go. And as you said, it's not working. And now we're 2 games in, but we did have, a handful last year where we knew he would be kicking off the rust and everyone was hoping he would really springboard into this year. Weapons on the offense that they have, that O-line, which you're right. I mean, they gave us 6 sacks last night. And I mean, now some are not always on the line, but the line was getting beat bad on some of the plays that you normally wouldn't see by some of their better players. But it was happening last night, and that defense of Pittsburgh with 2 defensive touchdowns in this. Again, when you see the score, it's not like we're talking about, oh, wait, Pittsburgh scored 26. No, they didn't.
No, I can say, let me paint a picture of what the Pittsburgh Steelers night was. Because as we try and assess everything we saw from last night, Dad, I think the Panthers and the Saints conversation is pretty easy, right? Saints have a great defense and an offense that's going to major in wholly unremarkable, but they play one of the easiest schedules in football. Them and the Falcons, according to the FTN Almanac, have the 2 easiest schedules in the NFL. It's why when we talked to Aaron Schatz before, he thought that could be a 2 playoff division because the schedules are just such a soft landing spot. And at some point, if the Saints offense puts it together, they might be fine. The Panthers do not have anyone that can get open on offense, full stop. Bryce Young is going to struggle some because he's a rookie, but he is far from their major problem on that offense, where they just do not have anyone that can create separation. For these 2 teams, the Browns we just talked about, but for the Steelers, this is interesting. So for the Steelers offense, Kenny Pickett finished the night 50% completion percentage for 220 yards. They averaged 2.6 yards per carry on offense trying to rush the football. The Steelers defense had 6 sacks, 11 quarterback hits, 9 tackles for loss, 4 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. It's like the 12 days of Christmas in this MFer for that defense, and they are sending gifts every which way. Dad, that is not necessarily wholly sustainable. There were Fire Pat Canada chants going on in the crowd last night, and some egregiously bad offensive decision-making by that offensive coordinator and the unit that he was trying to employ. So unless they get a lot fixed on that side of the ball, Dad, you're going to have, I think, a common thread for the 3 teams we just mentioned outside of the Panthers is a lot of defenses looking at their offense going, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, and for Pittsburgh, they lost Deontay Johnson. He's on IR, so that certainly hurt them. But, Matt Canada, who had been this great offensive mind in college, jumping through different colleges, finishing at Maryland, where eventually he was the interim head coach for a bit, got his first pro gig in Pittsburgh in 2020 as a quarterback coach and has now taken over as a coordinator. It has not gone well at all. We were ready to take that next step with Pickett to Pickens, which we did see for a nice,
the only good play.
Yeah, that was it.
The offense.
A 71-yard touchdown where it was a nice pass, nice catch, and a great run by Pickens for the touchdown. But really, that was it. But this defense scored a touchdown the first play of the game. A little miscommunication on the route. Receiver had to reach for the ball for Cleveland. Ball goes in the air, bounces in the air again. Alex Highsmith takes it to the yard. And then when they're losing, and Cleveland was up 3 in this one, and it was 7:06 left, second, and you get the sack fumble at the end of the game where Highsmith just absolutely goes by the left tackle, knocks the ball out. TJ Watt scoops and scores easily their second touchdown. And they take the lead for good, and then Cleveland's route on a 4th down, their run to try and get back into it. But the defense was fantastic. Watt now is the all-time leading sacker for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
And you want to talk about a title that means something.
Think about that. This Pittsburgh defense, how many Hall of Famers they have, and he is the leading sacker in 7 years. That just shows you how good that he is and has been and will be. But it was clearly the defense. You read the stats. So, and you're right, the Fire Matt Canada chats that went on. I mean, I don't know where this offense is going, but it's going to be led by the defense, but they can't do that every game. There's no way they can do that every game.
No, at some point they're going to have to make a decision. I don't think Matt Canada is going to be part of a future where the Steelers offense performs well. I think that ship has sailed. And so it's going to be when they're willing to make the decision and make the call on that, because they do have a young quarterback that we all saw show promise in the preseason, but unfortunately that ain't the regular season. And so far, Kenny Pickett has struggled. He has looked inaccurate at times, and he's had a difficult time really mustering anything for this offense to hang their hat on identity-wise. So it's hard to walk out of last night feeling good about any of these teams. Like, at least for the Panthers, there's the understanding that this season is not what you're playing for, and that this roster is going to need a major overhaul at the skill positions to try and get things right. You're going to need development of the offensive line that seems to have regressed after last season and the way it ended, but yours is at least for another day here. For the Steelers, for the Browns, and for the New Orleans Saints, your time is here and now. And the New Orleans Saints, it's a little cleaner operation, just not all that explosive, not all that dynamic.
No.
For the Browns and the Steelers, it's legitimately these performances offensively are hindering our team from getting anywhere near where we want to go. And that was playoff expectations and people's playoff expectations for the Steelers, Super Bowl expectations for the Browns.
Absolutely. And then Mike Tomlin said it best after the game. He said, you know what I'll ever do is apologize for a victory. They're too hard to come by. He knows it was an ugly one, but it's one you take, and it was a division win as well. A Cleveland team coming in had won their first game. So you never apologize for that. You take the win. You try and fix the mistakes going forward. I'm a little surprised in the other game in the Saints offense. Yeah, you have Michael Thomas coming back, who's finally looks pretty healthy. Yeah. You have Chris Olave, who had the great catch yesterday to help set up their go-ahead touchdown. Now, Alvin Kamara will be back soon.
Yes.
He's out with suspension, but he'll be back. So I would expect.
In his stead, Tony Jones Jr., 2 touchdowns last night. Go Irish.
That's what I was going to say about the Saints game. The big thing for me is we know that the Panthers have a ways to go offensively. Defensively, they're not there. This is a building year for them. I expect more out of the Saints offense. But with Jamal Williams, their running back, getting hurt in the second quarter, entered Tony Jones Jr. from Notre Dame, gets 2 touchdowns. By the way, last night, it shouldn't say Saints 20-17 over Panthers. It should say Notre Dame 20-17. Notre Dame players scored every point.
Oh, that's right.
Blake Grupe's field goals and extra points, and then the 2 touchdowns by Tony Jones. Notre Dame guys, all 20 points. Not that, we don't want to build up Notre Dame here, but
Notre Dame of the Bayou, baby.
Woo! Beignets for everybody. That's all I got to say.
Squad up down there. So it was good feelings down in the Bayou. It was, like you said, for Mike Tomlin and company up there, it was, we're not going to apologize for a win. But, Dad, I do feel like some of the Steelers conversation has devolved into talking about their floor and really neglecting the ceiling. Because with Mike Tomlin, we know you're going to somehow find a way to be 500 every year. But the Steelers don't fill their trophy cases with 500 records. That's a franchise with a standard. I mean, you walk into the building and the standard is the first sign that greets you there. And so far, the defensive standard has been maintained, but offensively, in a world towards the end of Ben Roethlisberger and now trying to transition to the next, they haven't scratched the surface of anything that feels even close to approaching what their ceiling can be.
So let's see if they can remedy that a little bit. I actually have their next game next Sunday night. They're playing the Raiders. And the Raiders coming off getting drubbed by the Bills 38-10. They got the first win of the season, but over the Broncos, and nobody thinks that's a huge win, 17-16. So let's see if the offense can be a little more productive against your Raiders defense, because this Pitt defense certainly is one of the better ones around.
One of the better ones in the NFL. But again, we know all eyes were focused on the situation with Nick Chubb, the Browns running back. And Jesse, we know we got a chance to hear from not only Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski, but also quarterback Deshaun Watson on this front after the game.
Yeah, so you guys mentioned how the broadcasters were like, we're not going to show this replay. It did show inside the stadium, and you could just hear the crowd just groaning. So you knew it was really bad. And, Stefanski and Watson similarly somber during the post-game presser.
Nick's got a very significant knee injury, which is, you feel for the person. He's a great football player, as we know, but he's an even better person. So we will support him every step along the way.
Tough. I just sent all my prayers to him. I mean, at that moment, it was tough. Once we, saw the replay and exactly what happened, it just a lot of flashbacks to, the previous one he had in college, and it just, yeah, it was tough, honestly.
Yeah, that's really bad. He's obviously, or everybody's saying he's, likely out for the season, and we'll know more as he gets treatment for that, but not good.
No, and Jesse, you mentioned too, and it's worth giving a nod to that Steelers crowd. They saw that inside the stadium, and the response is a lot of cheers of support for Nick Chubb as that went on there. They really understood the severity of that very quick. Because like you said, they saw the angle of that none of us at home thankfully did, that showed the true severity of that injury. So tip of the cap to the Steelers crowd there for doing the right thing. We've seen a lot of fans around football doing the wrong thing as of late. And so this is, clearing the low bar of humanity.
This was just horrible, and I'm glad they didn't show the replay. And he knew it too when he hit the ground. His teammates tried to come help him up, and he was like, "No," and you knew it would come out on Twitter. There was a little different of an angle, and you could kind of see what happened. It's the perfectly worst timing. He was just planting on that left leg when Minkah Fitzpatrick came and tackled him low. Not a dirty tackle by any stretch, a good tackle, but just caught it right as his foot was planting, and it just went the way, obviously, it wasn't supposed to go. And it's a shame. So really quickly, as Kevin Stefanski said, you move on, you have more games to play. So who's out there? Do you trade for Jonathan Taylor? Do you trade for Cam Akers? Because there seems to be a real disconnect out there with Cam Akers and his team. And Kareem Hunt. Remember, Kareem Hunt was the running back mate of Nick Chubb, and he's a free agent out there. Do you bring him in? That's probably the easiest one because it doesn't involve any of your assets. So we'll see what direction they're going to go.
They're going to have to make some sort of move because, again, this is a Super Bowl roster that they've got to capitalize on. And, again, I think you've got to ask yourself some pretty big high-level questions about how you're going to organize your offense. And the way that you should, based on everything we've seen, is still around trying to run the football, trying to get bigger personnel on the field, and making that your focus. Dad, the timing for the NFL on a headline that came out for them before this game was pretty egregious too. As the NFL filed a grievance against the NFL Players Association on September 11th, but we heard the news broke yesterday, alleging that union leaders, including President J.C. Tretter, have advised running backs to, quote, consider feigning or exaggerating injuries to help increase their leverage in contract negotiations. In a memo sent to the league management, the council and executive committee obtained by the AP, the NFL said the union made the suggestion to running backs during a Zoom meeting before the season. So, Dad, basically on the day we saw and were reminded of, and listen, the weekend, we saw Saquon Barkley with an ankle injury that thankfully is just a sprained ankle, sounds like he'll be week to week. But seeing that and then this gruesome injury for Nick Chubb, a running back who has been one of the best in the league, has gone out and produced at a high level for his team, and like others feels undercompensated based on that, the NFL has basically accused running backs of potentially exaggerating the effects on their body the day that we see one of the more gruesome injuries you will all season.
And the tough part is, J.C. Tretter, the president of the NFLPA, he said publicly, you need to create as much leverage as you possibly can. He went on to say, I think we've seen issues now. I don't think anybody would say they were fake injuries, but we've seen players who didn't want to be there or they're currently there have injuries that made them unable to practice. So he kind of said, I know I'm not supposed to say this out loud. And he kind of insinuated that. And the league said, wait a minute, you can't do that.
He definitely did. And in any other world, the league might turn out to be right pointing that out. But what a win for the players to have that come out on the night when this happens. So you can point to that if you're J.C. Tretter and absolutely say, you're going to accuse our players of going out there and not putting it all on the line or not giving it all when you just saw that happen. As far as leverage in this situation, the players, the timing could not have been worse for the NFL on how that happened. So we send all our well wishes to Nick Chubb, and hopefully he is once again able to bounce back from a knee injury. Remember, hurt himself like this while he was in college playing football there. Coming up next, we will switch gears and talk to Vikings quarterback Kirk Cousins next.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. I'm Jesse Cofield. Kirk Cousins and the Vikings not off to the greatest start in 2023. Kirk himself, 708 yards, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception so far in the regular season. But if you think about that, we have some 2023 season projections throughout 17 games. He's on track for 51 passing touchdowns. He's on track for 748 pass attempts, 6,018 pass yards. The record, by the way, pass attempts, 733 by Brady last season. And then for passing yards, record 5,477 by Peyton Manning in 2013. So this season remains to be seen what's going to happen here. But the guys had a chance to catch up with Kirk Cousins and talk to him about their season outlook. Let's take a look.
All right, very excited to welcome to the program Vikings all-everything quarterback and all-around good guy that I think the world got to know in the quarterback Netflix documentary, especially Kirk Cousins, kind enough to come spend some time with us in the show today. Kirk, thank you so much for joining us, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well. My pleasure, guys. Good to catch up with you.
Great to have you on. And first off, I got to ask, in a world of playing football and then being in the media and being around cameras a lot and then seeing what you did with that documentary, how intrusive was it to have cameras following you around as long as they did?
Well, it wasn't too bad. NFL Films were the ones kind of handling it, and they do such a good job following players around all the time. So it was kind of, same old for them. And, we picked our spots where they were going to be at a practice or in a meeting or around the family, but it wasn't every day, all day. And so I thought it was really cool to capture that content and have it for, my boys someday, because they're 6 and 4. So they're still a little bit young to remember it all. So, it helped to win 13 games and have a great season, win our division. We picked a good year to do it.
Any part of that got filmed where your wife said, no, that's not getting in there?
Well, they did give us the ability to kind of, X out anything we didn't feel comfortable with. And I was probably the one, more around the football saying, hey, that needs to be in or this should be taken out. My wife was actually very wanting to be away from it. So we had to really twist her arm to do a sit-down interview. She kind of wanted to follow me and not have them follow her. And so late in the process, we kind of finally got her to sit down and do an interview. And then she ended up being kind of the star of the show. So it was funny how that worked. And moving forward now, she's going to get a lot more requests, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I think everyone now knows to give her credit for anything you wear from here on out. Since I think like a lot of married men, people found out like, hey, he's smart enough to listen to his wife when she tells him what to put on before the game. So that was a ton of fun to watch. Kirk, and you mentioned the good season you guys had last year. Obviously been off to a less than stellar start for you guys, even though you personally have played incredible. How do you balance that knowing, hey, you're going out there and putting up great numbers and performing really well, but the record hasn't reflected that yet?
Well, this league's all about winning, and that's really what it boils down to. We got to find a way to win, and in our case, the way the season's played out, it just isn't that difficult. We turned the ball over 7 times. Our turnover differential is -6. End of story. There just isn't a lot more that you have to go fix. you can have a lot of good things going for you. But if you're turning the ball over 7 times, you're probably going to lose. And that's where we find ourselves now at 0-2. So pretty straightforward to know how to fix it. And we just got to go out and do it.
While we as talking heads talk about these things now, do you guys as a team look at what are the stats of teams that are 0-2 that make the playoffs?
I haven't looked at that personally. I know that I've been 1-5 before, and we ended up being a game away at the end of the year from being in the playoffs. And when I first came into the league, only 6 teams got in from each conference, but now it's 7. And so again, you have another opportunity to get in. And it's still so early, and we know that the next 15 games are really going to determine the season more than the first 2. But that's no excuse for not winning football games. We got to get back on track.
You mentioned what this league's all about, your past there. So many people still like to bring up the primetime narrative and the things around your career. Does that bother you? Is that something that still kind of eats at you to hear people in the media, despite that being disproven largely?
Well, I think you just got to look at your own production and say, hey, I'm a part of this team. I'm not the whole team, and I've got to do my part. And, in games where I don't play as well as I should have, I've got to go back and address it. But in games where I feel like, hey, I'm seeing coverage, I'm going through my reads, I'm well prepared, I'm executing what the coach are asking me to do. And yeah, we didn't, come out with a win, but I feel like I'm getting better and playing well as a quarterback. I think, at times you can put your head on the pillow at night and feel good about your contribution. So it's a little of both, and you just want to make sure that more often than not, you're going home feeling good about the level you're playing at.
One of the things that comes along with being the level of athlete and quarterback, especially that you get talked about the good, the bad, and the rumor. And all of a sudden it's out there, the trade. Oh, do we trade? Does this team trade for Kurt or that team trade for Kurt? How do you deal with that? I'm really on a personal level.
Well, first of all, you kind of just stay insulated and go about your business. All the TVs in our practice facility, we have tuned to hunting channels and the golf channel and the tennis channel. We're not really trying to listen for the hot takes and the news story of the day around the league. So some of that's just the insulation and ignoring the noise, as we say. But inevitably, you're going to hear things. And really, I'm just so busy getting ready for the next opponent, the Chargers. I love playing for Minnesota, and so that's really where my focus lies. And it's hard for me to even have the energy or time to think about much else.
Well, you had the energy or time to author some pretty wise words from Kung Fu Panda before one of the games that went viral recently. So I'm wondering, in the pantheon of kids' movies that you've seen as a dad now for a while, what is Kirk Cousins' favorite kids' movie that he's had to watch?
Okay, so I got a really good one for you. And I don't even know if you'd call this a kids' movie or not, but we're flying to one of our preseason games, and I put on Little Giants, just saying, hey, let's check it out. It's 25 years old. Let's go check it out. I was laughing out loud in the coach seat I was in on the plane, just dying with every line. I mean, every single line was getting me, because I think partly because playing football, you just know the dynamic, the culture, and the jokes just mean more. But that movie is tremendous. And when my boys are old enough to see it, that will be a must watch in the Cousins household.
Oh, absolute classic comedy for sure, for football guys, no doubt about it. And speaking of your kids, I was fortunate to play long enough where Mike was 4 and my son Jake was 3 when they finished. As you mentioned, yours are 6 and 4. So how has it been kind of having them involved and being around it? Just how cool that's been as a dad.
Yeah, I got to ask Mike Jr. because one of my biggest goals when we had kids, I told my wife, I want to play long enough where they can remember it, have been a part of it, and really, when I retire, be able to have taken it all in. So we're just starting to get there now. My older son is 6 this fall, and he can go to the games and know what's going on a little bit, but it's still, he doesn't quite know what dad does for a living. So, I got a few more years I got to play, and then I think my boys will have some pretty special memories.
Well, you'll have it better than me because Mike always said his favorite players were Jerome Brown and Clyde Simmons and Reggie White and not me. So at least your kids probably at least think you're,
believe me, my boys prefer Justin Jefferson far more than they prefer dad.
There we go. Got to work on the gritty at some point there and see if you can win them back there. But Kirk, speaking of kids, we know you're here on behalf of a really important cause with Cause for Alarm, the program with Kidda. What can you tell us about what they got going on?
Yeah, so Kidda builds fire detection equipment that's in most of our homes, and they're doing a campaign right now. They call it Cause for Alarm campaign. They've written a jingle. that's titled Beeps That Last, Get Out Fast. And so it's just important to alert people to the importance of their fire detection equipment. And unfortunately, the NFPA has found that 70% of homes, their equipment is not up to date, and therefore it may not do the job in an emergency. And so it's something that's not on the top of our minds when we wake up in the morning, but it needs to at least be addressed in our homes with batteries being checked and equipment being checked to make sure that in the event of a fire, we have what we need to protect our loved ones. So that's the campaign, and we're just trying to get the word out the best we can.
Hey, listen, it's something you hope you never have to use, but are happy that it's there when you need it. And the best thing about that is they have a jingle, because jingles are the best.
Jingles are hard to beat. I didn't get to write this one. I told them if I come back for the next year of the campaign, I'd like to contribute to the songwriting as well. But they did a pretty good job in my absence. And like you said, jingles are helpful to kind of educate and make sure everybody remembers what they need to do in the event of a home fire.
I was going to say they should note that Kirk Cousins was a part of the script writing, as we've seen in all the ads for the NFL this season. So he's got a great background ready for all that stuff. Kirk, we can't thank you enough for the time, man. Best of luck the rest of this season. Hopefully we'll get to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, great catching up with you guys. Thank you.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic here. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield with us. And we'll wave goodbye to the NFL for a few and head to the world of college football, Dad, just because we're in a place that we have not been in quite a while with one particular program because, Bill Connolly, who does a great job over at ESPN, the author of the S&P Plus stat, put together a list of the most impressive unbeaten teams in college football. And to not see at this juncture in the season, Alabama football anywhere on that list, it's a bit jarring for everybody involved. There's still a lot of names that we would all recognize, a lot of teams that have been great so far this season, including a couple that are going to meet in South Bend for College Game Day this weekend. But we've talked a lot in the last couple of years about the changing of the guard with Georgia football sort of taking over the mantle as the best team in college football here. Dad, it's still been pretty surprising to see just how quickly it's appeared to get very difficult for Alabama this season.
It really has. And in the NFL, we know it's all about the quarterback. In college, it's not always all about the quarterback, but boy, if you have a great quarterback, it sure helps. So we've seen that at Bama. We've seen that at Ohio State. We've seen that at Clemson. And we saw how well those teams did. And for the first time in a while, they are hurting at the quarterback position. And do we think some of the better teams that are playing them are saying, ooh, this is our year to play Bama and exact a little bit of revenge for what they've done to us?
I mean, listen, you've already got Lane Kiffin out in the media this week accusing the Alabama of quietly demoting their defensive coordinator and having someone different calling defensive plays. So he's ready to spark it up this week as Ole Miss gets ready to head out to Tuscaloosa. But, Jesse, we did also get the announcement from Tuscaloosa and from Nick Saban himself about what their plan at quarterback is going to be for the rest of the season.
Yeah, guys, pretty shocking. Alabama is out of the top 10 for the first time in 8 years. You got to go all the way back to September 27, 2015 to find the last time that this happened. Obviously, they've had some struggles at quarterback. Okay, Jalen Milroe started those first 2 games. Then he did not play against USF. But finally, Nick Saban has come out and given us some clarity on the quarterback situation.
You know, from a quarterback standpoint, this is all I'm going to say about this. You know, Jalen really showed the leadership that I was looking for, you know, during the game in terms of supporting his teammates and doing the things he needed to do. He's had the opportunity to play, so as the other guys. Jalen played the best of all those guys, and so I think he's earned the opportunity to be the quarterback.
You saw him being a great teammate during that game, just like celebrating with his boys, and obviously that's what you want to see.
Oh, and especially in a game that seemed to be a pretty easy proving ground for the other quarterbacks. Like, Dad, the play was obvious here, right? Jalen Milroe had been your quarterback to start the season, but so far he hadn't looked like the quarterbacks that we've seen in the recent run of Alabama. It wasn't so clear-cut, oh, we've got a future Heisman Trophy winner or a future first-round draft pick here. And in a quarterback battle that had been so close coming out of the spring, going all through fall camp, they decided, hey, we're playing South Florida. We're going to try and see these other kids. We're going to get a look at Tyler Buckner. We're going to get a look at Ty Simpson, and we're going to see what it looks like. I don't think in their wildest dreams they had imagined they would have a game that was a one-score game into the fourth quarter that would also feature a lightning delay and multiple quarterback swaps there. But I figured they wanted to get a look at these guys against an opponent they thought they would go manhandle. The look was not great, and so they are going to go back to the best of their options. Not the best quarterback they've had in a long time, but the best of their current options, which seems to be no doubt Jalen Milroe.
Trying to think of the last time an Alabama team without injury has gone through 3 quarterbacks in the first 2 weeks of the season. And think about the statement that Nick Saban just made, that Jalen Milroe earned this by not playing. How bad was the quarterback play that went on that he was a good teammate and showed leadership by cheering everybody on, so he's now our starter? I mean, it obviously obvious. If either one of those other 2 quarterbacks who got to play looked good, they'd be the starting quarterback right now. Jalen Milroe got his starting job back, not because he was a great leader, it's because the other 2 guys blew it when they had their chance. That's the bottom line.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. I mean, that was a nice bit of coach speak to go and make the situation sound good when it was essentially Jalen Milroe.
He earned the job. I mean, seriously.
It just, it's Nick finding a nice it's Nick finding a nice thing to say so he doesn't have to say what you did, which is what we saw on Saturday was below the standard at Alabama. Jalen Milroe's at least giving you the ability to make plays, and now for them, it's going to be Nick Saban along with offensive coordinator Tommy Rees deciding how they want to position this. Is this going to be an offense, what we saw even against Texas in that game, able to move the ball really well on the ground when they decided they want to go and be that team. But we know Alabama's offense and defense are kind of like an add-on to, not in place of, when you're a new coordinator coming in. It's how Nick Saban has been able to go for so long with as many different coordinators as he's had come into the building and still be able to create that continuity. And so we know from experience here at Notre Dame, Tommy Rees, much more of a coordinator inclined to make his living on the ground, multiple tight end sets. That's how he had to live at Notre Dame because of the players that they had and the skill option that they had here. I think with Alabama in recent years, we've seen them. It's been more spread out and wide open, especially coming off the Lane Kiffin and Bill O'Brien years. Now you might have to let everyone go back to keeping this thing a little bit tighter, a little bit bigger, and a little bit more downhill?
Well, I mean, Tommy Rees now 2 years in a row was having to deal with the same thing, right?
Sure.
I mean, again, your former teammate here at Notre Dame, last year right out of the gate, he's working with a backup quarterback in Drew Pine, so they didn't have a passing attack, and when they did, it was to one guy, Michael Mayer, who's in the NFL right now, so they lived on the run, which is something they wanted to do anyway, but it's always nice to have a complementary part of your offense, which they didn't really have. Now the same thing's happening in Alabama. If you get down, and we don't see them down an awful lot, it's difficult for them to pass back into a game. So it seems like Tommy Rees is dealing with the same issues now at Bama, to where, you better live off the run and you better have a lead, because it's going to be very tough to come from behind without a great passing attack.
And so Alabama's struggles so far kind of lead to an even larger conversation. And I'm sure one that is much to the delight of the rest of college football. The SEC, it hadn't looked so sweet.
No, they have not.
Through most of this season, they were 3 of 6 against Power 5 opponents in non-conference play. You had big wins like Florida State over LSU, Texas obviously beating Alabama last week, Utah beating Florida week 1 of the season. But you also had North Carolina over South Carolina. You had Miami beat the you-know-what out of Texas A&M
Sure did.
at a home game that was half full. And hell, you even had Cal and Auburn in a barn burner there. So all across the board, the SEC has looked more mortal than ever. Dad, is that good for college football at this juncture?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on your perspective. It's almost like, is Tiger Woods good for, good for dominating the sport? Do we love that, or do we want to see more parity? It's been really the SEC and then everybody else. Now, the Big Ten is looking good, a Pac-12, and they're about to go away as deep as they have been. But yeah, it looks like people are catching, or other teams and conferences are catching up to the SEC. So yeah, I do think that's good. I think, especially if you're not in the SEC, you'd like to see some other teams involved. And now, back to conference play, they're just going to start beating up on each other.
Yeah, and I think now that creates a different margin of error, right? When we look normally at the SEC, and for a team like Alabama who lost against Texas, we would say, well, one loss isn't going to keep you out of the college football playoff playing the SEC schedule. The out-of-conference litmus test at the beginning of the season kind of sets the table for what we're going to think once each team gets into their conference echo chamber. And as you look at the top of college football right now, Dad, you've got in the AP Top 25, Georgia still ranked number 1, but looking at the rest of the top 10, that is it as far as SEC teams. You got to get down to 12 at LSU to get the next SEC team in the top 25, followed by Alabama there. And so I think you look, I don't know how much further it's going to go. And with Georgia's schedule, as they now sit as the crown jewel of the SEC, they play nothing and nobody this year until you really get to the end of the season when we're talking about the conference championship game. The margin for error is basically none. In a world where we talk about the potential for 2 college football playoff teams from the SEC seems like a distant memory right now. That seems like something that's going to be more available to the Big Ten with Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan, and certainly the Pac-12 with all the teams that we get to talk about in that conference.
Yeah, it is. We're going through the top, the AP poll now, and seeing the lack of SEC teams is really something. You mentioned LSU, then Bama, then 2 away there. 15 is Ole Miss, and Ole Miss and Alabama square off now. So somebody's dropping again off of that one, and then you don't grab another one until you get to Tennessee down at 23. So definitely a down year for the SEC, which means everybody else is happy.
Yes, and as we're heading into a world where the conferences are going to keep consolidating and some new teams are going to start to enter the mix, we're now seeing more and more potential for other teams to step up. Now, it's not to say Nick Saban has been the best at adjusting in college football of any coach in my lifetime. And so I'll always give him the benefit of the doubt. But for him, for Dabo, for some of these other coaches and programs, dynasties don't last forever. Unless, of course, you live in Kansas City. Coming up next, some of the best news for those hoping the Chiefs' kingdom reigns for a good long time. Next year on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Guys, Patrick Mahomes said, Joe Burrow, hold my beer. He got a historic payday with a restructuring of his massive contract. So the restructured agreement is going to pay out $210.6 million between 2023 and 2026, which is the most money in NFL history over a 4-season span. So the compensation over those 4 years is now fully guaranteed, and KC and Mahomes plan to revisit this agreement again after the 2026 season. So when he originally signed this deal, he became the highest paid player in the summer of 2020, right? So $450 million. No player has actually topped that contract in terms of total value, but guys, we did see several quarterbacks have passed him in annual play, including 4 this year: Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow. But now we get a restructured deal for Patrick Mahomes, and he's worth every penny.
He's so good, they gave him a baseball contract at the beginning of all of this.
They really did.
That's what I always go back to is we always say when it comes to competent team building, I'm a firm believer that when you know you've got the guy at quarterback, you cannot pay him soon enough because it makes so much of what you're going to do financially for the rest of that team planning easier when you know you've got the guy. Very rarely has someone known they've got the guy as soon as the Chiefs did with Patrick Mahomes. So they gave this deal over the course of 10 years to the point where, Dad, they've done now a mini deal inside of this.
It's amazing.
Essentially a Russian nesting doll of an NFL contract inside a much larger, longer NFL contract.
Again, for people that don't know, his deal runs till 2031.
Yeah.
I mean, you just don't see that in the NFL. and it's all on how you kind of project it, right? Especially an agent about what they got for their guy, because average annual salary, he's not one of the top guys, but
over the life of
the deal. But what everybody will hone in on is over the next 4 years, it's the most guaranteed money at $210 million. And I know people are going to say, well, wait a minute, didn't Deshaun Watson get more guaranteed? Yes, he did, but over a 6-year deal at $230 million. So this averages more a year in guaranteed money over the 4-year deal. You're right when you say it is a deal within a deal. And a lot of times when you hear restructuring or redoing the deal, it's usually one of two things. Someone has to take a pay cut, or you're getting handed a check to help the team, which is the greatest restructuring of all time. You go to one of your guys who are making big money and say, hey, we'd like to restructure, turn some of your salary into a signing bonus so we can spread it out more over the life of the deal. So here's a check for like $16 million. Please take this to help us drop our cap number. I mean, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But this wasn't either of those. This was just a restructuring to get that more money in that next 4-year deal. But you can do something like that when you have that much space to work with when the deal doesn't end until 31.
Exactly. And it's all this admission. We had heard going back to the offseason that Mahomes was kind of looking around at a lot of these quarterback deals going, I'm not going to be anyone's 8th highest paid quarterback. This overall has still been a team-friendly deal.
It has.
From the moment he signed it, everyone looked at it and said, this was a guy giving the team that he loved and understood. Hey, Andy Reid and this offense have been a huge part of the reason why I've been very successful. Mahomes was going to be great anywhere. He's on greatest of all time trajectory because this marriage is so fruitful and this union is so perfect to the point where now they all looked and said, yeah, obviously we've asked you to do even more in the last couple of years, traded away Tyreek Hill, all these things that were a byproduct of the contract, but also an admission, you're the sun and the moon for us right now. And so they made that thing happen. So in terms of average annual value, if we're going to just treat it like this deal, and you're wondering why those certain amounts are in on this, he is now, by average annual value over the course of that deal, paid, I believe, $100,000 or $150,000 more per year than Justin Herbert.
Yeah.
When you look at this, it breaks down. Joe Burrow's making $55 million a year, and then Mahomes from 23 to 26 is 52.65, just ahead of Justin Herbert's $52.5 million. So they're doing whatever they have to by hook or by crook to go in and make it sound good, make the banner read well for Mahomes and his agency, and then get back to him being the best quarterback in football.
It's such a just how it looks thing, because you mentioned that, but over the life of this deal, it averages out to be $39 million a year, which is anywhere near the top. But it's just what you said. It's how you present it. And he gave them this flexibility by signing this long-term deal, as you said, and you're right. It was a team-friendly deal, still making a lot of money. I know there's people that look at this and said, my God, people, this is monopoly money, something we'll never have the ability to do. And you're right. everything is within the context of the business and the industry. And we know in this industry, the quarterbacks make the big money. Coming up soon, maybe this next group, if one of these rookie quarterbacks hit, you're going to be looking at a $300 million deal, right? Because because the highest right now is that 275. We're going to get there. It's just a matter of when we get there, and then how long that is, and how you break it up, and how you make it look for your player.
Yeah, but I think it's all of this in a sport, and you mentioned the length of it, why it's so uncommon. This is one of the most violent sports on planet Earth.
Right, yeah.
And in the NFL, where we always talk about guaranteed contracts and stuff like that, it's worth reminding, and one of the most important things I ever learned, I think, was from Dan Graziano, when so much of the fully guaranteed contract conversation was going on with quarterbacks. Fully guaranteed contracts are not mandated in any collective bargaining agreement in any sport, in any sport in North American sports. None of them, the NBA or anything else. It's risk assessment. It's basketball is an inherently less risky sport than football, where injury is such a built-in part of the model. We saw that on full display, unfortunately, last night in Monday Night Football. And so to take this kind of look at a quarterback and say he's so good that even if we factor injury into the model, which is a certainty in this sport, we're comfortable with that. That says a lot in a league where we see guys have to fight every step of the way to get what's theirs in the process.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you look this week, they have the Bears. So, I mean, oh my.
Yeah,
I mean,
talk about a get-right spot. Because now for this Chiefs team in the micro of this year, last week got back on track, got a win against Jacksonville, a team that we expect to win that division down there, a team with a really potent offense. Chris Jones comes back in that game, gets loose, gets after the quarterback, tons of pressures in that game. Offensively, Travis Kelce comes back, scores a touchdown. We get the Iron Eagle Taylor Swift reference. So all good things for them around there. But, Dad, still not the Chiefs that we're used to here. But that being said, 1-on-1 feels a lot different than the 0-2 hole team like the Bengals are in right now for Kansas City, who is now at least the full version of themselves. We know Travis Kelce probably not fully healthy at this point. It might not be for the entire season, but now your team gets to start to operate in the version. And we talked about this. If the Chiefs are going to try and repeat, if they're going to try and go through this difficult AFC gauntlet, being the fullest version of yourself as early as possible so that you can try and keep in for that all-important 1 seed right now in the current playoff format, huge, and that went a long way this last week.
So we look at the AFC, we keep talking about the top 3, Kansas City being 1, and then, Cincinnati, Buffalo, Cincinnati. We keep putting Buffalo up there, and they came back with a nice win last week. Cincy 0-2, but as we said, Joe Burrow's 1-7 in his first 2 games at the time he's been in the league. So they're used to being in this position, and then they find their way. Is it either Miami or Baltimore you think is crashing that party that right now, or somebody else?
I think it's hard to avoid the Miami conversation right now. They've just looked so good and so potent, especially offensively. So I think I would put them above there. We know what the ceiling is for Baltimore, right? Because of how unique their quarterback's ability is and what that team is capable of defensively, the way we saw at the end of last year. Right through the first couple of weeks for Miami, we mentioned they had some important players out. Jalen Phillips wasn't on the field for them this last week, but that's still a team that we saw get gashed on the ground in week 1 in a way that said, all right, they've at least got some flaw that we might be able to exploit if we're an opposing team here, even if the offense might be like greatest show on turf, fast and lethal at this point.
Yeah, and maybe it leans to the defenses, right? And right now, the Baltimore defense giving up less points than the Miami offense. They gave up a few points last week. So and I like the Miami defense a lot in this one, but that offense is hard to, with Tyreek Hill and Waddle. Now Waddle's been nicked up a little bit, so we'll see. He's in the concussion protocol. We'll see. But those are the 2 teams, really, I think, to keep an eye on to bust through into that top level, see if anybody's going to unseat KC, at least early on right now.
And listen, for Miami, there's also, if Tua keeps playing like this, because he has been, right now, I think the best version of Tua Tagovailoa that we've seen so far. Quick decision-making, getting the ball downfield. There's so many people that have always, and listen, I've been in that camp too, where you look at, all right, is it Tua within the context of the offense? What is Mike McDaniel doing scheme-wise to help get guys open? In the past, it's felt like there's been more on the shoulder of the offense, and this year, it's really looked like a quarterback who is seeing the picture clearly, who understands the plan that he's put in place with his coordinator and head coach, and is executing it at some of the highest levels in the NFL right now.
By the way, highest rated quarterback in the league after 2 weeks, Jordan Love.
What a tangled web we weave. We will get to plenty more on that as we come up with our NFL superlatives, looking ahead going into week 3 of the season next here. Stick with us. It's GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. I'm Jesse Cofield. Fellas, it's time to go around and give out some superlatives, okay? So we're going to go through and start with most surprising 2-0 team. What do you guys think?
Yeah, so week 2 NFL superlatives, Dad. Looking around right now, most surprising 2-0, 0-2. We've mentioned so many of the statistics about how that start can affect your ability to eventually make the playoffs, the likelihood of teams doing that. So feels like an important one there. To me, there is an easy answer for most surprising 2-0 team. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who most people expected coming into this season were going to be set to tank for, whichever quarterback in college you choose to slot up top right now. If it's Crater for Caleb, that was supposed to be the squad. Baker Mayfield named the starter. Most people, myself included, looked at it and said, all right, the NFL's rambling man right now, a guy who seems pretty destined to be a journeyman who's capable of lifting your floor some. And they've gone out here and been able to make this happen now 2 weeks in a row. So I will say it's the Buccaneers overwhelmingly.
I'm gonna stay in that same division. Remember, this was a division that had a losing record. Tampa Bay make the playoffs last year, right?
Sure.
Right now they have 3 undefeated teams. New Orleans, the team you just talked about, Tampa Bay, and the team I'll go with, Atlanta. Trying to find out, is Desmond Ridder going to be the guy for them? But you like what they're building on offense. Bijan Robinson, a running back who they drafted, Kyle Pitts, a tight end, Drake London out a wide receiver. You like what they're doing on the offensive side, and they're 2-0. A win over the Panthers where you don't really say a whole lot, but they do get the 1-point win over Green Bay, which has been a bit surprising this year in Jordan Love's play. So I'll stay right in that division. While I agree Tampa Bay is there as well, I'm surprised with Atlanta, quite honestly, surprised with that whole division right now. As we were saying, somebody's got to win that division, but right now, 3 undefeated teams is pretty impressive.
And we talked about the ease of schedule was going to be a huge factor for all of them, right? Buccaneers, their wins over the Vikings and the Bears, albeit the Vikings were on the road. The Vikings were a playoff team last year, even if it's one that we all think overachieved quite a bit during the course of that season. Dad, let's go most surprising 0-2 team. Up until this point. Again, I think this is one that has a pretty easy answer. The Los Angeles Chargers are simply too good to be this bad record-wise, and it's prompted us to ask a lot of uncomfortable questions about Brandon Staley and his future with that team, but this start for this team is disastrous in a season where we always say, well, injury has got to be the thing that undermines the Chargers, and so far it's been the Chargers that have undermined the Chargers.
Yeah, I would lean toward them as well. I'll put Minnesota in there. Just we usually see Minnesota have a really good regular season. We saw what they did last year and then falter in the playoffs and starting off 0-2. As we talked to Kirk Cousins earlier about that. He's playing great in that. He's still with Justin Jefferson, the best receiver in the league. You traded for T.J. Hawkinson, so you have some power on that offensive side of the ball. Jordan, exactly. So you expect a little more of them, but their defense was bad last year. They're still not very good this year, but still in the regular season they have been better. Interesting matchup. Because the 2 teams we said are most surprising are playing one another. The Vikings and the Chargers. Somebody's going to be 0-3. Here's your stat. Since 2002, 99 teams have gone 0-3. 1 made the playoffs. The 2018 Texans made the playoffs in 18. That's it. Since 0-2 if you're 0-3. So the battle to not be 0-3, the Chargers and the Vikings coming up this Sunday.
My God. All right, yeah, that's a real loser leaves town match right there. And for the Vikings, Dad, it's interesting because it is surprising given what they did last year, but also at the same time, it's not surprising given what they did last year. We've said it till we're blue in the face on this show, but an NFL record, 11 wins in 1-score games last season. It's just not sustainable to live like that.
Right.
And their games have both been close so far this season. And I think we looked and said, all right, when you looked at last year, a lot of it was things like, special teams yard differential or penalty differential with teams, all these little areas that can ultimately be difficult to replicate year in and year out. The offense is going to stay very good. And I think the defense still could get better, right? There were a lot of people that thought what Brian Flores was going to come over and do, a more attacking style of defense, could make better use of some of the pieces on Minnesota's defense. But so far, that has yet to bear fruit. So I'll still look at the Chargers, but that Vikings team certainly not far behind them in that category. Let's go with Rookie of the Year of Week 2 as we try and boil down each season to a week here with a lot of these guys. But, Dan, we're already getting into territory where I don't know if we can over-exaggerate the Bijan Robinson accolades at this point here. he has been out and out sensational for this Atlanta Falcons team. And we've had all the discourse about running backs in the first round and where you pick them and yada, yada, yada. Could they have used more help on defense? That guy has been as advertised so far inside of the Arthur Smith offense that we thought the positionless football, all the fun things about that would be are there. He just moves different than about 99% of the players at his position in the NFL, to where forget just best rookie. He is going to be already in the conversation for best running back in the league at this rate.
You know, and he's a guy who maybe that running back position is looking at to say, is he going to kind of bring the running back value back up for what he's doing, running the ball and catching the ball out of the backfield, or is it still going to be that first contract, maybe get that tough to get the second one to get the amount of money that you want, a lot hinging on him, and he is delivering. To go different, I'll look at the rookie quarterbacks right now, and I'll look at C.J. Stroud. C.J. Stroud, while the Texans are 0-2, he's the first quarterback to go his first 2 games over 80 pass attempts and no interceptions in their last game, which was a loss. I get it. 30 of 47, 384, a couple of touchdowns, no interceptions. That's been a key, because that's what you see with the young players a lot is turnovers. And so I think out of the rookie quarterbacks, I don't know if you would agree or not, he's been doing the best. Now, Anthony Richardson has been running very well, though unfortunately, the one of the touchdown runs, he got hit in the back of his head, hit off the ground, and he was in concussion protocol. That's the one thing that's going to be an issue with him. He likes to run, and he is going to get hit. And I know he's a big guy, but he is going to get hit an awful lot. So hopefully he'll learn, what hits to take and what hits not to take. Now, this one, he's trying to get in the end zone, so it's going to happen. But I'm going to go with C.J. Stroud right now for his ability to not turn the ball over as he's learning and growing in the process.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the answer. And statistically, he's overwhelming, and he's the most traditional looking, right?
Yeah,
for Anthony
without a doubt.
Richardson, you're overwhelmed by the entire package right now. And I think for him, the expectation for both was different coming into the season, because even though it got proven to be largely incorrect throughout the draft process, this idea that Anthony Richardson was this overly raw process who was just the sum of his athletic gifts, as we went on getting in the lead up to the draft, more and more people saw, no, there's a lot of clean football on tape for this guy at Florida, albeit with just limited starts, but there's still some stuff that needed polish. I think there's still been that understanding that, all right, he's further ahead than most people thought, but the gifts also still translate so overwhelmingly physically when he gets out there on the field, when he does cut loose and run. C.J. Stroud was expected to be one of the 2 best quarterbacks who's in the conversation for the #1 overall pick, and has come in so far and has looked the part. Now, hasn't had any sort of protection whatsoever.
Sacked 11 times in the first 2 games. Yeah,
I saw Austin Gale, who used to be with Pro Football Focus, point out that through 2 weeks on True Media, C.J. Stroud's EPA per dropback splits when he's clean in the pocket, when he's under pressure. When he's clean in the pocket, it's 0.5. That's second best in the NFL as far as his expected points added per dropback. Every time he drops back, how much better is he making that team? He is second in the NFL with a clean pocket. Under pressure, he drops to 32nd in football. They've had difficulty protecting him. The offensive line has been banged up to start the year. And so you can see, though, brighter days ahead as that team improves around him.
Part of the build, right? And that's what you do around a younger quarterback. You know you're going to have growing pains. It can be tough, especially if you have veterans in the locker room who know your time is limited in the NFL. And basically, if you got a rookie quarterback, you're not going anywhere.
No.
And you're going to have to learn. But what young players do you have around this quarterback that's going to become the core? Because you see, core starting to form on certain teams, but are they older players that are they going to have to be replaced by younger players at some point?
You know what? It's interesting to that standpoint. I wish I could find which reporter I saw bring this up, but I saw people tweeting after the game about the buzz in the Houston Texans locker room, and the feeling among so many players on that team was said to be, hey, we've got the guy at quarterback.
Right. Yep.
And Dad, while you're talking about that effect of a veteran locker room, I do think looking and seeing, we've got something special there for guys, especially that have been around the league for a while and have lived through thin years or lean years at that position, or have been on other teams where they've got a guy that you clearly see isn't going to be a reason you win. We saw it with the Jets on Hard Knocks when you get a Hall of Famer, how clear that is.
Yeah.
But I'm sure to see, our team's got a guy and he's young and we're going to be here through the best years has to be really tantalizing.
And that's when you can make your moves. Like you talked about the other side, forget even Zach Wilson, go before that and Sam Darnold, where you thought you had your franchise. You didn't. You thought you had your franchise. You didn't. You bring in a Hall of Famer who's 39 years old. If you can say, this is our guy, now you can start spending that money around before you have to spend money on him.
Yeah.
You get that. That's when you can build the best, when you have that quarterback on that rookie deal who's playing well. You see a growing team start to spend the money to build around him, and I think that's what they're going to get in Houston.
All right, let's go from rookie of the year of the week to biggest injury of the week. And Dad, it feels hard to go for anything other than the Nick Chubb injury that we saw last night. Although I will say Joe Burrow's lingering calf injury, as far as importance to the team, just because it is your quarterback, you obviously just paid him, but also the expectations for this team. They are supposed to be right in line with the Kansas City Chiefs as far as a Super Bowl contender in the AFC year in and year out. And so maybe just because of positional value, I might put that in the same breath, but we know Nick Chubb's one of the best, if not the best running backs in the NFL, and that was devastating to watch.
And even if Cleveland is trying to now move more toward having Deshaun Watson leading that offense, that's not working. I know it's early in the season, but it's not working. So you always had the tried and true, reliable Nick Chubb to turn around and hand the ball off to with one of the better O-lines run blocking. They didn't really show it pass blocking last night, but run blocking. So you had that. If nothing else, if it wasn't going to lead your offense, it was going to be a fail-safe for your offense. And now that's gone. But you can look at, Saquon Barkley, being out for the Giants and taking that away from Daniel Jones. David Montgomery, we talked about Jahmyr Gibbs and what he was going to bring to that Lions offense. Well, it'd been Montgomery who'd been getting the lion's share, pardon the pun, of touches. And now he's out as well. So there's been some pretty damning injuries. But the one for Nick Chubb, forgetting just what they lose, just the severity of that injury, it was just brutal.
And I mean, Monday Night Football last night was a bit of a meat grinder.
It was.
I mean, you saw Zadarius Smith leave at one point in the game for the Cleveland Browns. Denzel Ward went to the locker room. Greg Newsome had an injury. Minka Fitzpatrick was ruled out of the game with a chest injury. It went along. So it was just a game where, unfortunately, and a night where we saw far too much of that creeping into the picture. All right, Dad, week 2 MVP overall. I'm going to go with Chris Jones. Coming back for the Kansas City Chiefs, because we talk so much about his holdout and what it did or didn't accomplish, and it really didn't amount to a whole lot as far as financial security that he was looking for there. But his impact on the field remains unquestioned. Comes back, has 1.5 sacks in this game, gets to the quarterback a number of times. I saw ESPN has that metric, and I have to say it's slow because, God, I am begging you, Seth Walder and the guys over at ESPN Stats and Info, the great analytics team there, we need a smoother name for this. Pass rush win rate, which is really difficult to say
it is.
fast.
You do have to say it slow. You're right.
Chris Jones was around 40%, which was one of the tops in football. 1 week sample size, but that means, for anyone unfamiliar, in pass rush win rate, it is the percentage of time that you beat an offensive lineman in under 2.5 seconds, that kind of mark of how long a quarterback holds a ball. So he was doing that on 40% of his snaps against the Jaguars this last week, which could be an indictment of the Jags. But I also choose to look at the player that had 15.5 sacks playing D tackle last year and say he's just really good at this. And first rattle out of the box coming back after that holdout crushed it.
Oh, he was fantastic. I mean, what he did, everything he was cracked up to be. It's still weird to me how he came back on that 1-year deal, which really a clear win for the Chiefs over Chris Jones, just looking like he wanted to get back on to the field. I'm going to go with Geno Smith. You look at Seattle in that first week when they got shelled by the Rams, it was a bit surprising. And now they play Detroit, who got that huge win on Thursday night, get all that rest going into the second game because it was on Thursday night. And Seattle ends up outscoring them 37-31. Geno Smith completes over 70% of his passes, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, 328 yards. He got back to looking like when Geno resurrected his career last year. I thought it was a nice game for them and a big win because all of a sudden after week 1 and that loss to the Rams, which we didn't think a whole lot about, we thought, wait a minute, okay, is Seattle now reverting to what we thought they were going to be last year when they surprised everybody? Is this really what they are? Geno Smith comes through with a big game. DK Metcalf has a nice game as well. Big catches under big situations. But I thought it was a nice week 2 for them coming off of what happened in week 1 and having a team on 11 days rest with a real big win in their first week in Detroit.
We knew that the Seahawks were going to be good this year. We knew that the 49ers were going to be great this year. I think overall, though, looking at the NFC West, the Cardinals have been a much tougher out than people expected for a team that seemed to be openly tanking. And then how about the Rams now? We mentioned that Seahawks team, part of it was people looked at that loss the first week and said, the Rams, really? That team that we didn't expect much of this year. And now through 2 weeks, the Rams went tooth and nail with that 49ers team this past week in a way that I think showed they're going to be a lot more competitive with a healthy Matthew Stafford. And to their credit, we talked about the F them picks model and the fact that they didn't own a first rounder for like 8 years, it felt like.
Right.
But they've made it up in other areas now, and some of their younger drafted guys. We know Puka Nacua has become a household name.
I mean, unreal.
Tutu Atwell, Kyron Williams, Steve Avila, their draft pick on the offensive line this year. Byron Young on the defensive side of the ball. Ernest Jones, like all of these guys that are not yet household names, but seem to be good players that they've picked up at a time where resources were scarce for them, has now already translated into a more competitive team through 2 weeks than most of us expected.
And we knew the team was going to change with all the moves they made to win the Super Bowl. And again, you win the Super Bowl, every move you made was the right move, right? Because it paid off. But you knew there was going to be, kind of tilling the soil there of youth. And now they have one of the youngest, I think the youngest roster.
I think the second youngest roster.
So you knew you were going to have to grow there, but we're getting to who knew that Puka and Tutu were going to be two names we were going to be spouting off as for the Rams. I mean, Puka has 35 targets in 2 games, 25 receptions in 2 games. It's stunning.
I think he has the most receptions through a two-game stretch in NFL history to start a career.
It's unbelievable. Puka and Tutu. That's where we're going with the Rams. No Cooper Kupp. He's still, I don't know when he's going to be back. That is just a horrible situation with his hamstring.
But that's another good reminder
Holy
that
smokes,
they were walking into this season without the second best player or the third best player on the roster.
Right.
How you organize him and Stafford after Aaron Donald.
And you don't know what the hell's going on with Cam Akers, who's just a healthy scratch all the time. So is he going to get traded? And, now are the Browns going to be looking for a guy like that possibly? But Kyron Williams is getting, the snaps now, the former Notre Dame guy there. But the Cam Akers situation last year for personal reasons, missing game this year.
They've made abundantly clear that it is not the same thing as last
exactly
season.
Right. So it looks like, time is ticking on that one for him possibly to be somewhere else.
But overall, cannot say enough about how impressive the Rams have been through 2 weeks. Instead, Dad, we expected them to be in this next conversation for our NFL Week 2 superlatives here. The Crater for Caleb or Do Bad for Drake team of the week.
Too bad for Drake.
Listen, that one's still up for consideration. I think we crowdsourced that for a while at GoJo and Golic on Twitter. If you've got a better Drake May tanking slogan, because I do firmly believe that's going to be a conversation about him and Caleb Williams, even though Caleb has been singeing eyebrows off with his play so far to start this season. Dad, the team that I will give this award to, because we came into the year again thinking it was going to be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are now 2-0. Thinking it was going to be the Arizona Cardinals, who are still very much in play.
They're 0-2, right?
They're 0-2, but a feistier 0-2.
I agree.
We expected. The Chicago Bears look lost right now. This is a team that we know was in the conversation, had the number 1 pick this year, traded it to Carolina for that haul, and has drafted good players, sawed off a lot of their arm last year defensively with the trades for Roquan Smith and guys like that. But, Dad, this continues to be an offensive scheme that seems to fight its quarterback more than embrace him. We had the concerns about effort week 1 from certain players on the team, but also, Dad, the lack of designed rushing attempts for one of the best running quarterbacks in the league. This was the Matt Nagy slogan that he seemed to be trying to go square peg round hole with his quarterback, but it seems like the current administration under Matt Eberflus is content to do the same thing. I'm not saying that Justin Fields is blameless in all this, but I'm saying that in a league that is more apt to meet your young quarterbacks halfway than ever, they seem to still not be willing to do so with theirs.
I did a couple of their games last year and was just amazed at just what you said. And I would say it on air. Why are they not designing things for Justin Fields and his ability? Luke Getsy's the offensive coordinator there. And I don't understand it. And I was one of those that said, do not trade Justin Fields away to get that number 1 pick. Keep him. But this is going to be kind of that year on where do you go. And I thought they tried to build around him, trading for DJ Moore and trying to get him some help. The old line still is certainly an issue there. But I thought they're trying to make the positive moves to help him. But I agree. I don't think they're helping him very much with the play calling there. And is this a team that if they're bad enough, they're going to go down the quarterback road?
To your point about the play calling, I saw Bill Barnwell at ESPN bring this up the other day. The Bears have called 4 designed runs for Justin Fields.
Don't
so
understand
far this season. Inexcusable. Coming up next, let's take a look ahead at the weekend slate as we are live here in South Bend, which will be home to the center of the college football universe this weekend. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield. And while Jesse is holding it down for us in the lovely Boston studios at DraftKings headquarters, Dad and I are both out in South Bend for this week here, which we know is going to lead to some pickleball at some point. We're going to try and make sure that is documented as my mom and dad are talking a hot mess of you-know-what about playing me and my sister-in-law in pickleball. That is upcoming. We're going to make sure there's video of that as I wash your guys' face in that.
You guys will be fighting, the two of you and Jenny. It's just a matter of time.
We will see if that video is able to do the kind of numbers. And really, the game this weekend in South Bend is Ohio State and Notre Dame are going to play. Top 10 matchup, college game day coming to town. Dad, they got a tall order to overcome here because the numbers have come out from ESPN PR for that Colorado State game from last week. The 5th most watched college football game on record at ESPN, shattering the previous ESPN late primetime window. Because remember, that game ended around 2 o'clock Eastern. It was the 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern kick. It was ESPN ABC's 4th best regular season game in the last 6 years, ESPN's most non-streamed regular season college football game of all time, and peaked around 11 o'clock with 11.1 million viewers, Dad.
I mean, that's amazing. I mean, that's 10 o'clock start. I mean, this one, Notre Dame and Ohio State, is like true prime time, 7:30. I mean,
they played in the slot where we're used to chasing overs with Hawaii overnight when you've had a bad day.
We're looking for bad beats, you know. That's why we're tuning into those games.
That's a sicko's window. That's not a prime time window.
And that's because of prime time and what he's done there without question. And they have a tall order. I know that's a game you're calling. Colorado going to Oregon in the back-to-back Oregon USC. That's a good matchup, but there's 6 ranked, including Notre Dame, Ohio State, plus Florida State, Clemson. Clemson not ranked right now. Florida State is. So what a slate of games this week, headed by, Notre Dame, Ohio State coming up here in South Bend. Last year, they opened the season at Ohio State with an Ohio State victory, closer than a lot of people thought this year. And that was with Notre Dame breaking in a new quarterback after injury, their second teamer. Yeah. This year, it's Ohio State who has started a new quarterback. He's got Kyle McCord's gotten a few games under his belt to get ready for this game.
And when that belt includes Marvin Harrison Jr. as one of the pieces on it.
Wow.
The task this weekend is so fascinating for this Notre Dame team, Dad, who has reason to be more confident than ever. Marcus Freeman in this press conference yesterday was talking about the difference of having a Sam Hartman at quarterback who's played in as many big games as we've talked till we're blue in the face about the advantages of having a quarterback of that caliber. But this weekend is one of the biggest tests, Dad. I came on record at the beginning of the season and said Notre Dame's season would be defined a lot more by the floor than by the ceiling. Would you go out and win games like Central Michigan last week, where it was a little closer for a little longer than you expected, but ultimately were able to pull away?
Did exactly what they should have done.
Exactly. Right. It shifted some now because of how potent they've looked and because of how good Sam's been individually. Now he's got an extra game, so most of the counting stats he's going to be at the helm at, but even efficiency stats, he's near the top of college football, most everything, yards per completion, all the things that Notre Dame has not known about for a long time. And so now you start to look at the Ohio State, the SC game, Clemson, we've got to kind of put in a different category at this point because they've just not been in that group of teams. This is going to go a lot further in defining that. And Marcus Freeman keeps citing, hey, this is a guy that's played in big games, which, Dad, is going to have to mean that transfers in the preparation to the rest of the team that has not been on the winning side of as many big games as we would like in Notre Dame's recent history.
So, I mean, in this game, we know Ohio State has pass rushers, has a D-line. Notre Dame is anchored by two excellent tackles. One who will be, a high first-round draft pick in Joe Alt at left tackle. They have Blake Fisher on the other side. They had to replace their guards. They have an experienced center. So that, to me, and a lot of times this is where it is. It's the unsexy part of the game, right? Talking about line play. But this is going to be huge here because pressure on Sam. The one thing you talk about, all those stats about Sam, the extra game and this and that, the most important number to me for Sam is the number 0. And that's the number of interceptions he's thrown. Sure. So not turning the ball over has been huge for Notre Dame, and especially in this game, what a test it'll be. But that D-line for Ohio State, name the NFLers they have already on that and what they're going to have out of this group against this O-line, which is going to have a couple of NFL.
Well, you just made the point. The edge matchup in this game is an NFL football game.
Yes, it is.
Joe Alt and Blake Fisher, Notre Dame's two tackles, are both going to be Sunday guys. Alt even the highest Sunday guy of that group. But then JT Tuimoloau, who burst onto the scene last year, really had the big game against Penn State, where he had multiple sacks, the interception in that game. He looked awesome. And then Jack Sawyer on the other side of him, who looks every bit of a maven on that side. So you're going to watch an NFL matchup on the edge of this offense. It's going to be where it is everywhere else. Coming into this season, Ohio State, the secondary that used to be the hallmark of that defense, a little more in question than normal. And for Notre Dame, a young receiving core that's looked good at points this season, but is still by no means the strength of this offense. So it's going to be fascinating to watch that, Dad. I tend to look at the Notre Dame defense and say that's a group that so far has underperformed. I saw Bill Connolly's SP Plus stat. They've underperformed relative to that, what they've been expected to go out and accomplish in a lot of these games. But they're going to be fully healthy this week. J.D. Bertrand, one of their captains and starting linebackers, was out this last week. You've got what I'd imagine will be an interesting revenge game for Javonte Jean-Baptiste, the former Ohio State pass rusher who is now on the Notre Dame side of things. Healthy across the board there. And for Notre Dame, that secondary led by Benjamin Morrison, who's one of the best cornerbacks in football, was an All-American last year. How they're going to approach guarding Marvin Harrison Jr., having, I hope, two sets of eyes on him at all times. As great as Ben is, Marvin Harrison Jr. is the kind of generational talent at that position, and we don't use the G word lightly. That means you've got to account so much of your resources towards that guy, and then it's going to be, can your players in the box that are a little bit lighter in the ass than most hold up against Ohio State and these great running backs that they've got? Because that could be the challenge that comes when you've got to devote all that time and energy to Marvin.
And you saw Central Michigan making yards on that Notre Dame defense right up the gut.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing fancy at all. Straight up the middle, making yards. That has to stop for sure. But, man, I'm looking forward to Cam Hart on one side, Ben Morrison on the other. The cornerbacks, they're strong there. They're some deep there where they have some slot corners as well to cover. Maybe not so much at the safety position. So I'm interested to see how they match up with Marvin Harrison Jr. in this. And also the fact that Notre Dame doesn't get great pressure one-on-one.
No.
They get it by the blitz. So if you're blitzing, you're really putting those guys on an island. How do you cover? How are they going to cover Marvin Harrison with the corners and with the safeties when you're kind of bringing the house a little bit to get some pressure?
You mentioned there's a whole bunch of other ranked matchups on the slate this week. This is really payment for what we all suffered through last week.
You're right.
The games ended up being more entertaining than we expected, but certainly not qualifying as good. I think, Dad, one of the more interesting ones for a lot of reasons is number 24 Iowa on the road at number 7 Penn State. One, because we have the hilarious subplot of the drive for 325.
Yes, we do.
Offensive coordinator Brian Ferentz' quest to score 25 points a game as part of a contract stipulation for him. But also, Dad, this Iowa defense is blue chip stock. They are nothing fancy. They run a 4-2-5. They go out there and they just play sound football and they suffocate people. For Penn State and Drew Aller, their quarterback, it's been a lot of good, but also a little bit inconsistent. You would expect with a young player. He's going to get stress test against a really good defense this coming week that should be indicative of just how high the Penn State machine can climb this year.
What is the over in this one? I mean, holy smokes, I'm going under all the way. Now for Iowa in the drive for what? The drive for 25?
325.
325. They're averaging, yes, they average 25 points a game. Right now they're averaging 28 points a game thanks to the 41 they put on Western Michigan last week. They've scored 24, 20, and 41. So the average is over 25 right now, but it is never, we don't think of Iowa as this offensive juggernaut by any standpoint. So I think this is a low scoring game. And I do think that Penn State ends up winning this one.
The Hawkeyes are 5-4 at Penn State under head coach Kirk Ferentz. And I think a lot more people, because we've seen Wisconsin has been underwhelming in the Big Ten West. And so it looks like Iowa's side of Iowa's division on that side of the conference to lose. But this to me is about, in the early portion of this season, while we've got a lot of teams that are still undefeated with a lot of hopes out there who really haven't played a whole lot of anybody yet outside of teams like Texas that have gone out and got one of the marquee wins at the early point of the season, there really haven't been a lot of other great measuring stick games. Florida State and LSU, I guess I should throw in that as well. They've been hard to come by. And so especially now that we're getting into conference play, games like this are going to be very, very important. So looking forward to watching that unfold. Looking forward to coming up later in the show, really having to put my hand up and admit that I made a mistake on the front with Iowa. But coming up next, we're going to talk to college football writer Nicole Auerbach about some of the headlines around the sport next on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. I'm Jesse Cofield. There has been an update on the Mel Tucker situation. Michigan State University informed him in a letter Monday of the school's intent to terminate his contract for cause, citing a body of undisputed evidence of misconduct that warrants termination. Guys, this is an update we're getting, and you've got Nicole Auerbach with you to break this one down.
Yes, and we greatly appreciate Nicole's help today and every day. Senior writer over at The Athletic and NBC Sports College Football Insider. And Nicole, Jesse mentioned the update there. Can you take us back for just a brief second on the timeline of events that we've seen since the USA Today article came out documenting Mel Tucker and this inappropriate relationship that he had been a part of at the center of these allegations?
Yeah, this has all happened really quickly. And so basically that article comes out overnight, Saturday into Sunday, and Michigan State decides to suspend Mel Tucker the very next day, essentially for a code of conduct violation, like if you think about the way that they described it. But it took a couple days to get a little clarity because they had a very short press conference. They didn't answer a lot of questions. And Mel Tucker eventually puts out a statement trying to defend himself and clear his name. He calls the entire investigatory process a sham and really takes aim at Michigan State for even investigating a relationship between him and an adult woman. But obviously, the school feels that this was something that they could investigate. So that's where we start, because there's two different processes that they could have taken here. I talked to a lot of Title IX and investigation experts last week, and what they described to me was you could have waited for the formal grievance process, which would have included the hearing that we know would have taken place and will still take place, by the way, in October. But then after that, you got to wait. And then there's a formal written report, and that gives you a finding and a determination, and that could help the school fire Tucker for cause. But we're talking that could be a month after the hearing. So that is a long-term potential outcome here. Or the school could have taken the route that they did, which was basically to go after Mel Tucker for violating the terms of his contract. So they said that the things that he admitted to doing to investigators and that the statements he's made since this all became public, that they violated various parts of his contract. So there was one part where he was supposed to be presenting himself as professionally and ethically as at all times. And we know he lied to investigators because he got caught in a couple of lies about where he was when he had this phone call, et cetera, et cetera. And then also there was a second part where it's a moral turpitude clause, right? Like, did he do something? It's a morals clause. Did he do something that was against, kind of the morals of the school and what he's supposed to represent as the head football coach? And there was part of that about like bringing public ridicule onto the school. And they argued that he did all of those things because of the negative attention that this brought. And just in general, engaging in a relationship with a vendor, someone that the school has paid to bring in to educate their athletes. And then it especially underscores the point that Brenda Tracy is involved in teaching young men how to behave in relationships with women or how to treat women right and not have sexual misconduct, not sexual assault, and how to intervene as a bystander, all of those types of very important lessons, and that it is especially egregious for Mel Tucker to embarrass the university by trying to engage in a relationship with her while she's a vendor of the school. And then we also know that she wasn't supposed to come back. So those are part of the reasons that the school decided they could investigate this, but that's not why they decided to terminate him. They're saying that essentially that he did not react or behave himself professionally, ethically, responsibly, and that he brought embarrassment and ridicule to the school.
Nicole, I saw your tweets yesterday, like the 4-page letter. It seemed like that could have been replaced by, we're going to fire you because you're really dumb. I mean, it's just ridiculous what Mel Tucker had, the position he put himself into here. And there are those that, reading through all of it, Nicole, are going to try and break it down and say, well, on the other side, they're going to say, wait a minute, if these are two consenting adults, why is this a situation where Mel Tucker could get fired?
So that's a great question. That was the first question that I had when I was talking to experts about this. And the reason that the school started the investigation after Brenda Tracy filed a complaint was because she was considered a contractor of the school. And because, again, according to her complaint, and as we now know from the investigation and what was reported by USA Today, Mel Tucker was supposed to bring her back to talk to a team, and then he canceled that. So the school said, this is a relationship with a vendor, a contractor. So therefore we have some jurisdiction here, but also because the visit was canceled, it affects the ongoing relationship from a business standpoint for the school. So that's why they were able to go at this from the path of going through the investigation and the grievance process. But again, now they're basically just saying, like, your judgment was bad, you embarrassed us, and you violated the terms of your contract. So again, they're basically, that letter, the 4-page letter, was like throwing the kitchen sink at him, because again, they're trying to fire him for cause. So they need to say all of these different ways that you violated the terms of your contract, so we don't have to pay you $70-80 million, whatever that final number is. And we don't know if for sure they're going to be able to not have to pay him at all, but they're throwing the kitchen sink and showing all of the different ways that they believe he violated policies.
He signed a $95 million deal, of which $79 million is still on the table.
And so that's a huge factor going forward in the for cause portion of it, like Nicole mentioned. Nicole, we've only got about a minute left. You mentioned the hearing coming up in October. That's still scheduled right now. What role, if any, is that going to play in the proceedings from here on out as far as it concerns Mel Tucker's job?
Right. At this point, it may not really affect his job because, the school already gave him notice to terminate. So he has 7 days to respond, but they could fire him 6 days from now. And the hearing will still go on. It will go on without his participation, and even if he is fired, because the point of these processes and these investigations is that you need to have a finding. It needs to result in something, so that, let's say if it's not a high-profile football coach where everyone knows the behavior and it was a professor, if they didn't get all the way to the end and have a formal finding, that person could get hired somewhere else if they just got fired in the process. So you need to reach the end of the process, and that's why you can do it with or without that person's participation at the hearing. And there will be, again, a final written decision and a determination when all is said and done.
And that is what we have coming up again. But for anyone, again, just joining us now, Michigan State has sent Mel Tucker in that multiple-page letter the notice of their intent to terminate him as their head football coach as the result of these allegations. Nicole, thank you so much for the time and the explanation on all of this, all the great work you've done covering it. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anytime, guys.
So, it's a team that still has to play games, right? They're 2-1. They just lost to Washington. Washington, like they do to everybody, put up a lot of points against them. Longtime MSU assistant Harlan Barnett has been the interim coach. They brought in former Michigan State coach Mark D'Antonio in a consulting role to kind of help them out as they work through this.
Yeah, and now this is going to be the difficult part in all of this, is where do you go from here, especially for a school that Michigan State overall has had far too many headlines dealing with sexual impropriety and misconduct around that campus. And so, Dad, whatever you do next, you're going to have to do very carefully, because there is certainly the understanding on one side that, yes, this is a program where this sport and football matters a lot, but also you're dealing with a perception that has been created by the actions on your campus of who people think of and what people think of when they think of Michigan State. And so you have got to go over the top in vetting the next candidate for your head coaching job, that this is someone you're going to be able to trust out at the helm representing your university. Because again, going back to what Nicole said there about what can be proven and what cannot be in here, what is indisputable is that Mel Tucker went out with his actions and publicly embarrassed his employer and the university at a time where they are extremely vulnerable and sensitive to headlines around that university. And so that is going to be what you've got to have at the top of the list of what you want out of the next coach, is someone that's not going to put you out like this publicly again.
And that's two schools, right? So Michigan State, you mentioned all that's gone on that campus. Northwestern, same way, right? Not just the football team there with Pat Fitzgerald, but other sports as well. So it's kind of boy, things need to be cleaned up overall in these programs, and where does it start and where does it finish? Because you got to change that perception.
Yes, exactly. So
perception, it's not a perception, it's reality.
Yes, it is the reality and the appearance of the program from the outside world. So that, as Nicole really artfully laid out for us. Coming up next, though, we will get ready to end the show the way that we always do. This, that, and the third, coming up here on GoJo and Golic. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Here to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to end your day. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review. Leave us that 5-star rating. Check us out, DraftKings YouTube, DraftKingsNetwork.com, Samsung TV Plus, and more coming soon from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday, live. Dad, let's get to this. One of these stranger stories in America over the last few days has been the disappearance of an F-35 military marine aircraft that was deployed. Apparently, the pilot was forced to eject during the course of a flight, and they just straight up lost the damn thing.
Know where it is. Pilot's fine, right?
Pilot is fine.
Right.
Everything's good. Now, we have just gotten news yesterday that apparently debris from that missing F-35 was found in South Carolina. But, Dad, the fact that we had like a full-scale manhunt, basically putting this thing on the side of milk cartons for about a day and a half, little bit embarrassing look for the military, right? The fact that they couldn't put, like, they got those little apps for luggage that you get lost on a plane trip that you can use out there, Jesse. For civilians, the fact that we couldn't find this plane for an entire day, not exactly the look I want projecting to the rest of the world.
I don't know, because clearly the jet's stealth abilities are second to none. We can't even find it. It is so stealthy. So I don't know, maybe it's just a case of the technology working too well.
Hoisted by our own petard.
Even if we have the stealth, shouldn't we know where our stealth planes are if it in fact was stealth?
But see, you know what? Jesse's got the right PR spin there. It's, sorry, we did such a good job. Even we couldn't find this thing. So military members who might be flying this, look, you're going to be safe wherever we send you in this. Because if the American military, which by the way, I would go back to for them, remember, they came out pretty quickly when that whole submersible thing happened. Yeah. And said, oh, yeah, we heard that sound and knew about that days ago. And we knew about it going through a military training operation, kind of like trying to flex in the middle of a tragedy, which is wild. But I would point to that and say, we know where stuff is generally pretty well. And we were able to even hide this from ourselves. Big spin zone. Stay with
Imagine this meeting, though, when they're all getting together trying to decide, okay, how are we going to portray this one? Where are we going to go with this? Talk about needing a common sense person in that meeting of we lost one of our planes. And they're always great when a plane, you know, and again, nobody in it, nobody got killed. So we're happy about that. But they always let us know how much the plane costs.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and if it's pilot error, do they take it out of his pay? I mean, you know, what
Definitely
happens?
not. He does not have a spare 100 milli hanging around.
I wonder if this is like a Ferris Bueller protocol where they took the car out for the joyride in the middle of the day, and now they're trying in the garage to see if they can reverse
set the odometer back.
Yeah. I feel like the play is not to ask the public for help in this situation.
For help finding it?
You pretend
the truth.
You pretend that everything's going according to plan and you figure it out later. But this whole like, hey guys, we lost a plane. It's flying around somewhere on autopilot. So if you see it, give us a call. Probably not what I would have gone with.
Here's the flight pattern. Anybody that's around that flight pattern, see if you can see anything.
I mean, the U.S. government's got so many years of denying the existence of UFOs. I thought this would be the protocol of just saying, oh, nope, just government training exercise, nothing to see here. And if you do, then they just come in and Men in Black you with the reminder.
That's exactly right. Be cool if that thing was actually real.
I mean, we don't know.
It might be.
Let's get to, speaking of air travel, let's get to that, Jesse, as we had an interesting situation for an NFL running back and some of his family members this weekend.
Yeah, Raheem Mostert is beefing with an airline, American Airlines to be exact. So he tweeted at them saying, how do you bump a mom traveling with 3 kids off a flight out of Rhode Island? I scored 2 touchdowns against your home team, and this is what happens, man. And guys, they responded so fast. Yeah. We'll have them on their way as swiftly as possible, and we are sorry for the inconvenience this caused. And it was hysterical, all the people in the replies being like, you're not sorry, American Airlines. Airlines are never sorry for delays and crap like that. You can just feel everyone is really tense because nobody likes traveling by plane these days.
Is that the easiest victory to be had online, is just going at, outside of, and I know Big Cat's made a huge bit out of this, if you're a member of the sports media and you publicly complain about airlines, you're not going to win that battle.
No.
But if you're basically anybody else, then it seems like this is the easiest win you can possibly get on God's end.
And that's the one thing I don't understand is the bumping process. There's got to be a process. But to have a mom with 3 kids picked out to say, yeah, you guys are the one get off the flight seems rather odd. But again, I don't know the process, and it seems I'm sure it got rectified. But I love how Mostert brought in the fact of about what our team did to you guys, so you're taking it out of my family.
It's always the tough part because it never feels like I am the same way where I look at every individual airline as a monster. Like most of them, overall, what they represent, they understand we need them. And so because we're trapped inside that gigantic bus stop in the sky, they can pretty much do whatever they want. The problem is there's so many little people along the way. Like, it's never worked. Like, don't be MFing the gate agent or anyone who works there.
Exactly.
It's not their fault. But there are all these collections of little people who I don't think have any control over the process versus like big airline monolith who's sitting at the top who I can never get to yell at for all the things that happen.
Well, I mean, this is how it works, right, Jesse? I mean, whenever there's a big company that wrongs somebody, everybody rips the big company, goes after them. But to Mike's point, and I always try when I'm going to the gate agent, this isn't directed at you. And then I go on my rant just to make sure I've told them it's not directed at them, which I'm sure they still feel it's directed at them.
Right. Like, I know you didn't come up with these policies, but I'm upset because X, Y, and Z.
I mean, I think of the poor kids that have to run every airline social media account. And just the hazard pay that they deserve after the fact, because I get none of it's directed at them, but prolonged exposure to that kind of sewage cannot be good for the human brain. As someone that has existed on the internet for quite some time, I can assure you of that. So whoever those kids are, because I'm sure they are kids, God gives his toughest battle to you, his strongest soldier, and in this case to Raheem Mostert's family. So we hope they got where they needed to go, especially for people traveling with kids, because there is no greater challenge on this earth that I have seen, and I maintain that if I run for public office ever, I will run on the platform that no parent should have to pay for anything as soon as they step on airport property. We got to put together some sort of fund to make it so the minute you walk in with kids, everyone at the counter just looks at you and goes, no, you need this. Just go ahead and take whatever you need and get through this because you're in actual literal hell.
It's the one thing you do look around. When we travel for our games, we're traveling alone, right? And if there's a problem, you get bummed, but then you look around and you see parents or moms or something with their kids and you go, okay, you know what? I'm going to shut the hell up right now.
Man, and some of the people that'll like eye roll, like when you hear a baby screaming and crying and they're acting like, we obviously have the like guy who challenged the baby to a fight on that one flight that was hilarious. But in general, anyone that rolls their eyes at a baby or has something snarky to say to parents, mind your business. The rest of the plane should be allowed to kick your ass because you're ridiculous.
Yeah,
I like this last story. Yeah.
Skylaw, kick them right off the plane.
That's exactly right. I love this last story because this should have been me, and it was you, and I'm so happy.
Yeah, let's get to the third here, Jesse. I got and found out that I am now officially old on the internet.
I just want to say, this Brian Ferentz video, you're not the only one who got. Pretty much everyone on the internet thought that this was real, and then somebody must have been like, wait a minute. So basically, deepfakes have gone too far. This video came out. Everybody's reporting that it's real. There was cursing in it. And then we come to find out this is a deepfake video, which begs the question, what are we doing out here in the wild west of X, of Twitter, where you have no idea what's real and what's not?
I mean, it's a general internet problem too, but yeah, coming off the headlines that Elon Musk is talking about charging everybody on X, yeah, brother, for this bunk product,
go ahead.
Be my guest. I'll see myself out. I got the blue sky code you guys are looking for, trust me. But Jesse, it is difficult. So in the video, Brian Ferentz, the deep fake of him, is addressing reporters after this last weekend about the contract clause, the drive for 325, and then punctuates it with some pretty frosty language.
Yeah, he does.
You can climb out of my, and I won't say it.
Yeah, you can grab your step stool and climb out of my bleep because I'm pretty sure we just scored 41 points this past week.
Yeah.
Dad, you're right. This is usually what happens to you. Jesse's right in that deep fakes have gotten really, really good. But man, I used to think I had it. I used to think I was always taking the time to make sure and vet these things. And then I could usually tell when the mouth was off in the deep fake. This is a humbling moment where as I near my 34th year on this earth, I've realized the game might be passing me by.
Yeah, I think you have to learn to do it my way. Barely answer on Twitter at all. And when you do, just do it to people you know.
Man, you know what? I didn't think my jersey retirement from Twitter would be coming this soon, but apparently I might be forced into it like a lot of other former professionals. Thanks so much. Download, subscribe, rate, review. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.